Streaming live from home of Cultura Media House and 786 Sports. It's El Big League Show with Adrian Lorenzo. Now batting, Danny Enriquez.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to El Big League Show. A lot going on. MLB, full swing. A lot of teams heading in different directions. We'll break down one of those teams with the Atlanta Braves. College baseball headed to Omaha. 8 teams left. A lot of great talent on display. College baseball is having a moment. We'll break down some of the things we saw in Super Regional, some prospects to keep an eye on. If you're an MLB fan looking to bolster your team in the draft, we will break that down. Also looking at some emerging young talent with some elite company based on the numbers they have. I am here with the one and only 2-time World Series champ, former MLB exec, and artist of the year in my book, Adrian Lorenzo. Adrian, how we doing?
I'm doing great, man. Really excited to be here. Really excited to be eight episodes in now.
Yes, sir.
Point.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for that always overly generous and overly embellished intro, but it's appreciated nonetheless.
Yeah, man. No, this is really a fun time as a baseball fan. We're having college baseball and MLB really rocking at the same time. High stakes. You got the trade deadline kind of looming. You got the draft kind of looming. A lot to get into. But I don't want to start, let's say, on a sour note, but we got to talk about the Atlanta Braves. Lost 14 of their last 17 games. You know, I've heard a lot of different reasons for the slide. There's not one obvious thing, just heartbreaking loss after heartbreaking loss, bullpen struggling to hold on to some leads. Big picture, though, I know you know a lot of people in that front office. You're very familiar, having competed against them when you're with the Miami Marlins. Just know how they operate. I've heard speculation it's a loss of leadership on the field, a lot of different reasons. What do you see when you go under the hood with the Atlanta Braves?
The Atlanta Braves, it's probably the team that I have had the most long-range respect for in terms of just most exposure to the organization, being in the NL East when we were with the Marlins, and before that they had a run of dominance. I think it was like 13, 14 years where they won the division in a row. And that's in this iteration of it. And then before that, the Atlanta Braves were America's team because they were on TBS. And I was a big Andrew Jones guy. Andrew Jones was one of my favorite players during that run. So the Braves have always just been this, they've just been there, and they've kind of been there in this big brother role of dominance, at least over the Marlins in their run. Like they beat the hell out of us, man. They had our number in every way, shape, or form. Like when we played the Braves, it was a nightmare matchup for us. I thought we played them tough, but I still have Freddie Freeman nightmares and Ronald Acuna and Marcell Ozuna. Like those years were still games we lost that those guys decidedly took over. And they were just dominant in the NL East through that time frame. And now we've entered into an era where they're not the dominant force in the NL East. And I think that's the rarity. Like the Phillies and the Mets have not been able to like maintain this top of the NL East standing or standard in a while here. And the Braves, for the first time in a long time, the window has opened for somebody else to take that top spot in that division. And it's surprising to me. It's surprising to me because you look at them on paper and they still look like the same lineup, the same team. I think they scout exceptionally well. I think their amateur scouting department deserves an enormous amount of credit. Most of these players are homegrown. I think their international side for a long time did a really good job as well. Their pro scouting, as well as Alex Anthopoulos, is probably one of the more aggressive general managers in the big leagues or presidents of baseball operations. And I think that he's got a really good feel for the game. Longtime Blue Jays executive before this. So knows what it's like to play in this tough division, you know, when the Blue Jays were in that tough AL East, which is still tough. But I think that he is a wheeler and a dealer, and he has gotten out in front of a lot of things. Like I remember Acuna and Albies signed long-term extensions when they were young in their service time. They were kind of like the first wave of teams to really explore that long-term extension with the players that you believed in. So I thought they set a lot of trends. And then every year they seem to have 1, 2, 3 homegrown rookies that pop onto the scene. And that's true. It's true this year too. But some things have changed. The division's gotten significantly better. The Mets are, way better than they were. The Phillies are better than they were in the past 5-7 years. And so I don't know that they've done too many things wrong. I think the division has gotten better. And then they've had some Acuna going down again with a knee injury, Spencer Strider, not being who he has been pre-injury, and then going through that injury portion. And then your margins for winning and for being the top dog in the division they're slim. So any little hiccup is going to cause you to fall as far back as they have been. But it is surprising to me. I would have put them right up at the top of the division no matter what. Maybe it's because I'm scarred from so many years, but it's surprising to me to be talking about the Braves in this seller position almost as we approach the deadline. But still a lot of baseball left.
A lot of baseball left. And look, you understand the Mets and the Phillies have a reason to be on top, but 9.5 games back of those guys. And then here's the one that shocks me. They're only 2.5 games above the Marlins, who are themselves in a particularly tough stretch on top of having a rough season overall as expected. So not the kind of company you want to keep. Just going look at the surface stats here, not even going under the hood, 21st in runs. You expect Acuna to eventually contribute to getting that one up. 13th, though, in team ERA, with the bullpen struggles being what they are. You're still getting very good starting pitching.
Yep.
Let me ask you this, because this is something the fans talk about a lot. You've been, even though you were not a major league player, you've been in major league locker rooms. You've been in that side of it as well as the front office side. Fans like to talk about leadership. I heard Ken Rosenthal talking about a steady loss of leadership for this team. Freddie Freeman first out the door, Swanson out the door, now Max Fried. Do you think there's something to that? It's hard to say from the outside. I know you're not in that room, but is that a potential real substantive issue with a team like this that's trying to find its way?
Excuse me. Yeah, I do think it's an issue, because anytime you subtract Freddie Freeman from an equation, I think you're going to be worse off for them, no matter who you put into that spot. And Olsen's been really good for them. Swanson, to a certain extent, doesn't have that status of Freddie Freeman, but it's a plus addition across the board going outward. Those things are going to hurt you. So, but you also have things like Chris Sale coming in, and so you have, like, it wasn't a complete exodus without any of that coming back. But the Braves did have something special with that position player core, that they ran out the same lineup almost every day, regardless of a righty or lefty. That's really rare. So any shakeup to that is going to cause some degree of retraction or diminishment in this clubhouse leadership. So I do think it moves the needle quite a bit. I still think at the end of the day, the quality of your roster should be able to, if you have a quality roster, you survive those things, and then new leaders from that younger wave or from that next wave kind of emerge. But for one reason or another, it hasn't happened for the Braves this year, and in the second half of last year either. This kind of decline started in the second half of last season, where they missed the postseason. And now they're in this spot where they're, like you said, 2 games ahead of the Marlins only? That's not territory you want to travel in right now in today's game. So yes, it matters. I can't put all the stock into that. I think if you only added clubhouse presence without the requisite talent that comes with those clubhouse presence, you only go so far. So if you kind of isolate that out, it takes up a lot of the portion, but you still have to have the talent to back it up. Like you can stack 5 clubhouse presence guys, but if they're not your everyday performers and drivers of what's going on, then I think I'd still rather have the performers. I don't know if it's 60-40, if it's 50-50. I think arguments can be made for both.
And there's injuries at play here. A.J. Smith-Shawver, you hate to see, out for the year with torn UCL. Spencer Strider back from a torn UCL, but kind of lingering stuff going on. The velo is down. The swing and miss is down. Don't know how that's going to play out. You hate to see it was such an exciting player. But, man, to read this sentence was kind of surreal. With Brian Snitker, this is the description. This is not my description. This is the description from the game report on this, one of their very difficult losses. He fought back tears as he attempted to explain how painful the last few days have been, saying this is beyond belief, really. 9 run losses, MLB high. Bullpen, we talked about the one-day Craig Kimbrell experiment not quite working out. When there is a stretch like this, and there's enough talent in the room that you say, hey, listen, the rest of the season is meaningful. We could go on a run. How do you hold it together as an organization, make sure it doesn't go totally off the rails?
I wish I had the answer to that. That is a tens of millions of dollars value if you can find a consistent answer to that. But it's the reason so many managers end up getting fired, because it's hard to, once you lose it, it's hard to like pick that momentum back up. And for a long time, Brian Snicker would have been a unanimous kind of rehire every year. And I still think he is. I'm not connecting this downturn to this team is not being managed well, or it's being mismanaged. Now it doesn't help that luck is not in their favor. The bullpen decisions have gone wrong. The bullpen has imploded on them, even though they've got some pretty solid starting pitching. I mean, Chris Sale's still pitching at a high level. Like, they still have some good things going. It's one of those years where it's not breaking your way, and everything gets magnified in those years. And the Braves are a team that, it's kind of like the Red Sox and the Yankees, really, or the Dodgers, or teams in that tier. You can't afford to have down years or down stretches even, really. And to be out of it, seemingly out of it this far early in the year, this is where you want that manager job. Like, when times like this come around, like, you can't, like, it's a hot seat for a reason, and they get hotter when things aren't going well. But I do think that if I'm in that front office, I'm not looking at Brian Snicker personally, just given the track record. But I'm not in that clubhouse every day. I don't know. Like, there's some other situations where you feel like your manager has lost the clubhouse, and short of that, I find it hard to believe that that's the case, that he's lost his clubhouse in some capacity. But that would be the only time where, as a front office, if you feel conviction that that's the case, then you'd make maybe an unpopular decision. But if that isn't the case, then stability matters sometimes too, man. Like, these teams that change, whether it be front office direction or manager direction every 3-4 years, like that, I don't love that model either. It's hard to capture mojo, momentum, whatever you want to use for that word, for a team, cohesion. It's hard to capture that in 1 year, and to like build that trust and strength of relationship in one spring training. When you get hired that offseason, it's really tough to do that. So when teams switch those things out, I don't think people realize you're resetting so many things, and so many relationships that were invested in kind of like have to start anew. And it'll depend on the personality match between the manager or the general manager and everybody else in that dynamic. Some guys are built to pop into those situations and do well, but human nature dictates that's hard. That's hard. And I think the Braves would value continuity over just new direction here.
Great comment from Robert Perez, noting that Michael Harris's production has fallen off every year since his rookie year. You're around Jackie Bradley with the Boston Red Sox, saw him at the peaks. Yep. Obviously his career, just an unusual kind of career path, given how impactful he was. At the same time, looking at Michael Harris, it's hard not to see some similarities just in terms of the position, the defensive ability. Kind of, you worry about the bat. Am I off base making that comparison? And what can a guy like Michael Harris do to turn it around? Being around the good and the bad with the Jackie Bradley.
Off base, no, because he's so young. But the Jackie Bradley praise is so, I don't know, that to be put in that category, at least defensively for me, it's like, right, you don't earn that easily. But if you look at his Baseball Savant page, like he's in that category. He's traveling in that 96th percentile in range, 85th percentile in arm strength, and just a playmaker defensively. So maybe he does travel in that category right now, and I'm just stubborn because Jackie Bradley Jr. is, to this day, Jackie, you're the best I've ever seen at that position in person. I've never seen instincts like that. I've never seen somebody make such a good first step with every ball hit, and not only a good first step, but the correct first step, despite never truly being a plus runner, was an elite center fielder. So hats off to. Anytime I get a chance to shout out Jackie Bradley, I will. But Michael Harris, when somebody like Michael Harris, and it usually happens with shortstops, center fielders, catchers, you have one of those three guys being one of your premier run producers offensively as well, and an elite defender, you're going to end up with a good team. I can't quantify that. I can't say like, if you have a better shortstop, you're going to be a good team. If you have a run producing center fielder that also plays good defense, you're going to be a good team. But I think the teams that have those guys tend to be pretty good teams. And when that's not the case right now for Michael Harris, like it's not one of those offensive years for him, right? That's one less productive piece in a Braves lineup that has, for whatever reason, they have a smaller margin to operate with. And I don't know, when Michael Harris has been good, the Braves have been good. And this year it's a bit of a different story offensively. And I don't know that the correlation is 1-to-1, but I think the Braves would be better if Michael Harris was better right now.
Only 24 years old, so don't want to overreact, but I'm looking at the OPS, starts off on fire, rookie of the year, 853 OPS, drops to 808 last year, 2 years ago, then down to 722, now hovering around 600. Again, I use the Jackie Bradley comp. Jackie Bradley was older and had accomplished more in his career already at that point, but had a pretty profound drop after the COVID season, basically, which is why the impact changed for him, where he was, obviously one of the key guys on the championship team, a stud, and then, struggling to stay in the league. So, I don't know, 24 so young. It's hard to kind
Extremely.
it's hard to make too many big conclusions there, but you hope that he's able to hit enough to stay on the field because he's so fun to watch defensively and just overall. Austin Riley, Matt Olson, not having terrible years. I mean, but again, I know there's some disappointment when you talk to people around that are just Braves fans with those guys because so much is expected of them. I mean, Matt Olson's actually having, to me, a pretty good year. And Riley, you look at some of the way he's hitting the ball.
Riley's having a good year. Riley's it's one of those years where, from a process standpoint, like, what more do you want here? He's in all these categories in terms of barrel percentages, hard hit percentages, bat speed is where you want it to be, running well, actually providing some value on the bases as well. So, but it's not, these performances need to be above and beyond in order to outrun some of the other stuff, right? Some of the other bullpen woes, bullpen deficiencies, and when you don't have a collective contribution from 1 through, let's call it 1 through 7, 1 through 8, in this division, you're just not going to hang around very long. So I think that, like, those guys need to be overperformers in order for the Braves to be in a tier that they want to be. And that's just, it's not happening at a crazy level. They need to be having MVP caliber years for this to be a contending team. And they're having good years, but not MVP caliber years. So,
one guy we could talk about too, Ozzie Albies. I mean, multiple time All-Star, multiple time Silver Slugger, only 28. I mean, really, this should be the prime of his career, but he is having his worst season offensively. Is this someone you had a chance to watch when he was international prospect? I mean, what can you tell me about Ozzie Albies, the player, and where he needs to go to get back on track as a star of this league?
I did not have forward visibility into the Ozzie Albies amateur scouting process, but it'll connect to a player we've talked about a lot, which is Ceddanne Rafaela. So when I was scouting Ceddanne Rafaela, and you're looking for precedents of players to come out of Curacao that are infielders and that are twitchy, and so it's kind of like the Ozzie Albies was just breaking through at that point as a top prospect, and so he was there as a a comp, basically, for a young player that I was scouting out of Curacao, because I like to think about comparisons of players when I'm scouting. So, okay, this guy reminds me of this guy. And as a middle infielder out of Curacao, Ceddanne Rafaela I was like, okay, is he anything like Ozzie Albies? Could I make this comp? And I couldn't, because it was a switch hit. But I think you actually can hear it in some of the amateur videos of Rafaela comments on Albies and the comparison. So that's my connection to it. I didn't see Albies personally, but I used him as a template, and I watched a lot of his amateur video, which would not have garnered much. You don't watch Ozzie Albies' amateur video and be like, okay, that guy's going to be worth 15 plus WAR in the big leagues at some point. But that's how much we know about scouting. But in terms of this year, right? Like, to me, Ozzie Albies has always been a terror in terms of getting on base. Right? Like, remember Albies, Acuna Albies is a 1-2 in front of Freeman and Riley, right? It was just a nightmare matchup always, because those guys would always get on. They wouldn't chase. And now I'm looking at, he still doesn't chase, but he's not getting on, he's not getting on at the same level here. So that's such a huge part of his game. And swing, like what I mentioned on base and not chasing those, as we talked about, like those are swing decisions, swing decision related. And it feels like he's not at his swing decision best. And therefore the power outputs and the offensive production just really isn't there. I mean, the 650 OPS for a player like Ozzy Albies is just not what you'd expect. And you're right. He's not fallen off some cliff in his mid-30s. He broke into the big leagues early. Therefore, we've seen him for a long time, but he's just 28 years old. So I don't know. I don't know the answer for getting Ozzy Albies back on track. My from the cheap seats perspective is that there's the on base, the ability to get on base and force pitchers into your own zone, so you can force pitchers into your power zones, into your happy zones, green zones, whatever you want to call them. That's where the majority of your power comes from, and the strikeout percentage is up. So it's like swing decisions aren't there, and your overall miss rates are up. Like that's usually not a good track record. But if you ask me, if I'm a team in July and I have the opportunity to add Ozzy Albies to my roster, I'm not going to just weigh on the recent struggles. I'm going to tap into what I've seen in the overall career track record of Ozzy Albies to acquire. I'm not saying the Braves are going to move him, but I'm saying if a team ever had interest in Ozzy Albies, now might be the time to be asking. And I think you're going to get more of a regression to the mean into who this player is than the rest of the year. So I'm a huge fan of this player, and another one that gave me nightmares from a matchup standpoint. He was the switch hitter in that lineup. So he was always on the right side of a platoon. And it was actually, I remember him being more dangerous as a righty. So when we would throw out our lefties, he was the dude that was doing a lot of the damage, because it would be Acuna and him in a favorable matchup right at the top of the lineup. And that's tough when Freeman, Ozuna, Riley are behind that. So
you look at batting average on balls in play, career low. So you expect that maybe to tick up here as the season goes on, get closer to 300. Home run percentage, I think, is one area, just looking at some of these advanced stats, where you do see a clear decline. He was at 2.3 last year, 2.2 this year. In his real top form, it's closer to 5. So you see just the power percentages go down. So, is that part of the way he's swinging? Is there any kind of change in approach? I don't know. But that, to me, just from that standpoint, stands out. But you do expect that batting average to tick up as the season goes on. And
don't worry about batting average, Danny. Don't worry about batting average. Don't let that mislead you.
I got you. Well, listen, I'm worried about the Braves, and podcast de los Mayores with a great question here, which is my next question, which is, look, let's assume they're not going to be touching the Marlins in the standings. Let's assume they get a little better, but there's still a distance between them and the Phillies and the Mets. Could you see the Braves as sellers at this deadline? Again, I'm asking you to assume something here. Let's just assume there's not a miracle run or some not miracle. Assume there's no hot streak.
Sure.
They play better. They're not losing all these one-run games, but it's not like a situation where they go on a 10-game winning streak or anything crazy like that. Would you see a team like this selling at the deadline, or just saying, hey, listen, we got good players, we'll ride it out, and we'll have a good roster going into next year?
So we can kind of walk through it here, right? Like they are 14 games back of their division, right? They have a less than 4% chance to win the division and about a 25% chance to make the playoffs. So like you're not playing for the division, you're playing for the wild card, and you're playing for your ability to match up in a wild card scenario with Chris Sale and Spencer Strider in a wild card series. So when you look at it that way, there's an argument to be made that you buy at all costs just to get in. But the gap the hole that they'd have to dig out of is so big right now that I think it's more likely that they maybe not become true sellers of every piece that they have in what you usually traditionally feel like are fire sale situations. I don't envision that, but players that they have limited control over. So players on expiring deals, or players that just don't have much staying power with the organization moving forward anyway, may be more in line to be dealt. And you have a closer like Raisel Iglesias on your roster, like that's always a team always needs that. And like that's a high paid leverage reliever on a losing team is always it's kind of like you can't afford that as you're going. And with the volatility of bullpen pieces, I could see that potentially as being a piece outgoing. I don't have any inside information to dictate that that's going to happen, but it would surprise me if they were adding at the deadline in terms of leveraging the value they have in current pieces that will carry value at the deadline. I know I mentioned Albies. I know I mentioned, Raisel Iglesias. I think that's the last thing they want to do, but I think that you'll capitalize on some value, but you won't tear it all down for a complete reset. So not a total fire sale, but I think they'll be active at the trade deadline. It would shock me if they were adding some big piece to try to dig themselves out of this hole.
Well, maybe they get to, they go on a run. Let's say they're like 3 games out of the wild card or something like that. And let's say Acuna's starting to really round into form. Spencer Strider, the velo's ticking up. And you're saying, okay, well, a lot of these reasons why, bullpen normalizing a little bit, a lot of the reasons we were struggling before, not as much of an issue now. We have these great players going forward. We can get into a playoff series, like you said, with a Sale, with a Strider, and then with the position players, all it takes is one series for them to just completely blow up. Like, we saw what Soler did in during their run. There's a lot of guys capable of doing that for here. Talking about Riley, Olsen, whoever. Could you see them in that scenario? If they're, let's use 3 games out of the wild card, that they'd say, okay, let's get a bullpen piece and solidify that part of our team and go the other way. Yeah,
I mean, I go back to what I said about Alex Anthopoulos and that group. They've always been a kind of hyper-aggressive group, and they're always always doing things on the margins to be winning games, and they do seem to get quite a bit out of their waiver acquisitions, out of their minor league deals, out of their guys on, I think they do well at the deadline and with their trades. So I can certainly envision a way that they get out of this. But this is, like I said, it's a deep hole, and you have to be having these. I know their front office is having these conversations, right? Like, you have the Mets and the Phillies ahead of you. Like, those are up years for those teams, and you're in your down year. There's a 14-game gap between you and them right now. So in terms of, even if we sneak in, is this the team to make a deep run? Now, maybe your fan base dictates that you got to do that anyway. Maybe I'm personally on the side of that. I think more fan bases should be non-tolerant of you ever going backwards just for some future punt. That's not necessarily the smart or rational thing to say, right? If you think cold, calculated business and efficiency, that's not what you think. You got to shore up your stuff for next year, and I hate that. I personally do. It's irrational, and it's more of a fan type of position. But I think that if you're a major league team and you operate in the major leagues, you should always be attempting to do everything you can to win baseball games for your fans. You hold the trust. You hold it's a public trust that you hold for a region of people, that you should never be in this like almost purposely losing situation. But I think I'm a bit of an extremist on that front. But I think Major League Baseball would operate more healthily if that was the case across the board, and you completely disincentivized operating at the bottom.
And that's one of the benefits of expanding the wild card, right?
For sure.
That more teams are incentivized to, hey, if we get in here, we can do some damage. Right. Robert Perez, great point. Braves were 5 games from first place at the deadline in 2021. So, it's not unprecedented. Certainly, we've seen it happen a million times.
We need Robert Perez on the show
at some
point on camera here.
Let's get him. Let's get him on payroll, man. Supplying the stats here, but we'll see where it goes. Obviously, a critical stretch here
for sure
for the Braves, and that's going to probably dictate a lot of what we're talking about
here.
Big
month of June,
and
the way they finish June is like, I think if we have this conversation in a month or in 3 weeks, and I'd like to, we should revisit that topic and see where it's gone from there and how wrong or right I or we may have been, but. Definitely not the place you want to start the season, the first few months of the season. So I can say that.
I'll tell you someone who is red hot. That is Junior Caminero, the 21-year-old out of the Dominican Republic. I mean, you're talking about elite 100th percentile bat speed. It's just, pretty easy to see to the naked eye, and the baseball savant backs it up. not necessarily a patient hitter at this point. Bottom 20% in chase rate, bottom 20% in walk rate, but strikeout's not that bad. 64th percentile. He's able to make contact, and of course, the bat speed is absolutely elite. This stat floored me, just sort of comparing what Junior Caminero is doing now in his age 21 season. There you see the baseball savant, you see the bat speed. The range kind of jumped out. I didn't realize that he was lagging that far behind in range. That's something maybe going forward. Where does he fit on the field? We're learning that he's only 21 years old. I don't know if range, how much range. Let's start there before I get into this next point. How much can range improve as you become more comfortable on the field?
You can improve it. Range is different than foot speed, is what I'll say. Range can be improved a lot by you just being on time in your pre-pitch motion. So like when I'm evaluating a defender, for example, a guy playing defense, so much is happening pre-pitch that you don't get to see it on a TV broadcast. And so I therefore opt for some angle that's behind him, hopefully, and you can see the ball crossing the plate. So like there are things that you see a lot of guys bounce into their position. You see a lot of guys kind of just shift their feet at the right time. Now, if you ever want to see how locked in a player is, focus on his pre-pitch. And I haven't locked in on Junior Caminero, so I don't know. But if you clean up a lot of things pre-pitch, puts you in a better position to make a correct first step, which would therefore improve your range. Now, if you are limited in lateral quickness or lateral foot speed, you're always starting or working uphill. But what I just mentioned can put you in a better position to make a better first step, right? And then you can educate your feet more as you get older. So like with footwork and just things that you dedicate time and practice to, your feet can become more educated, even if you're starting to lose explosiveness and quickness. So your range can improve, but only to a certain extent. And the guys that have quick twitch, lateral athleticism, their range is always going to be preserved and a bit more because they can survive not being on time for a pitch. They can survive reading the ball off the bat incorrectly. But third base, I think, is probably the position that's least reliant on range because it's such a quick reaction time position. So you can actually have limited range. But if you have good hands and good arm strength, you can overcome the limitations in range. Really, only the balls that get you are like the slow rollers and things like that, where you got to really move out of your position. But you can have a third baseman with limited range if you have a shortstop with plus range and kind of net out in the same place. Right. And I think that's what Tampa has, right? So I think I wouldn't lock in too much on lack of range to say that he can't stick at this position. I'd more look at out completion. And if he's completing outs at that position, then it'll work. But the Rays are also quite famous for shifting positions around. But if they enter a long-term deal, into a long-term deal with Junior Caminero, I think they're going to look at him in a more fixed position than moving all over the field. So I love this player. I think he's an exceptional player. But you mentioned the swing decisions, and I think he wasn't making very good swing decisions at the beginning of the year and got off to a pretty slow start, but now it's picked up, and this is the kind of player that when he's hot. And I don't know if you remember him winning the Lidom Dominican Winter League. He won with like this towering home run and the biggest bat flip you've ever seen to win the Lidom championship for Escogido this year. Like it was won on a walk-off home run to dead center over the batter's eye. So this is a player capable of doing things at the top of the major league scale, and he's showing a lot of that here offensively. And another player where I've seen the whole arc. I remember him clearly from his amateur scouting process. It would have been I used to put players that you're really only one looking into a high, medium, or low category. And I remember him. He was in a medium category, hitterish approach, projectable body, probably not a shortstop. And you have to write little quick blurbs and notes like that because you're seeing 50 players that day, 100 players that day. And so I remember him clearly, and I remember us wanting to be in pursuit, but it was actually the Indians that signed him for a really reasonable, I think, six-figure signing, but not. I think it was like $100,000 or $200,000, something like that, if I'm remembering correctly. A guy that I would have liked, but not said like, okay, let's stuff this guy, or this guy's got to be paid X amount, which the industry kind of agreed with. But you don't get credit for that. You get credit for the ones being the ones to sign him. So kudos to the Indians and their guys at that time to do it. But then kudos to the Rays for capitalizing and making a deal for him.
Hitterish approach. I hear that all the time.
Yep.
For the layperson, what does that mean to you?
Oh man, I guess it's a good question. To me, there's obvious implication, but it's more, some guys just look like a hitter in the box. They just hitterish actions. They look like they're about to do damage, and you see that swing. It's either a pretty swing or a really quick, good move to the baseball. It's usually hitters that work inside of the baseball. Getting inside of a baseball, we talk about that a lot too. I think if you polled the majority of good quality major league hitters, they will all mention, I got to get inside the ball. I got to work inside the ball. So that to me is a hitterish baseball move. So when you see a hitter able to do that, I think he gets boxed into a hitterish category, even if he does other things ugly. And even if he's not a great athlete, to be honest, like hitterish and athletic don't travel together necessarily. I think you look at a guy like David Ortiz, for example, outside of that batter's box, he was not the most athletic looking player, but he got in that batter's box, and boy, did he look hitterish. Did he look like he belonged there? The actions made sense. Everything moved right. And I think that's what I mean. I know it's kind of a subjective thing. I can't put like a hitterish scale on there, but it's one of those, it when you see it kind of things. But even knowing it could take different shapes, so Ken Griffey Jr., exceptionally hitterish. But in my opinion, so is Austin Riley, right? And they're on the opposite end of the smoothness, like aesthetic scale, but both players are very hitterish. So I don't know if that answers your question, but Junior Caminero, super hitterish, top of the scale bat speed, which is always attractive. And then just a good move to work inside of the baseball.
Yeah, Agustin Ramirez, someone for the Marlins that kind of, you get that tension when he's at the plate, just like, he's just itching to do some damage. Great comment from Kane's Cat. You mentioned Taylor Walls at shortstop, making life a lot easier for Caminero. It would have been pretty nice to see him and Wander Franco together. Obviously, life intervened, and we won't get into all of that. But man, if you're the Rays, that's got to kind of hurt you to do everything right in that process in the Dominican Republic, and then off the field stuff that you have no control over, limited control over, interrupting what could have been one of the truly great left sides of the infield in the game. But just talking,
devastating.
Yeah. But
devastating.
Listen, you can only do what you can do. And to see Caminero do what he does, that's got to make you feel good. This stat blew me away. I honestly could not believe this when I read this, but 21 years old, WRC 128. I don't know or WRC plus, 128. Says 1980, only 14 players age 21 have carried at least a 125 WRC plus over a full season. Look at these names: Mike Trout, Albert Pujols, Ken Griffey Jr., Julio Rodriguez, Giancarlo Stanton, he was Mike Stanton at the time, Cody Bellinger, Ricky Henderson, Tom Bernansky, whose only name I didn't recognize on this list, but a 14-year big leaguer, made an all-star team, Jackson Merrill, Justin Upton, Miguel Cabrera, Ronald Acuna, Carlos Correa, Freddie Freeman. I mean, that's Hall of Fame up and down. You look at Justin Upton, who's like, he stands out as a different than the other guy. He's a 33 WAR guy who's been a 4-time All-Star.
Justin Upton was a dude.
So, I mean,
Justin Upton was a dude. Yeah.
This list is as elite as you could get. MVP candidates. So pretty
it's where
good
you
company.
want to start your career for sure. Like if you're hoping to, I don't know, get off to a good start, that's, I don't know that it takes so long. The longevity necessary to get put into all-time great consideration is such that like we're still so early on that like, well, it's off to a good start. So many things can happen, right? But that's, you need a lot to get to that point, and I'll reserve that for a while.
Question here from Kane's Cat: will there be a time where a junior Caminero makes it to college? Seems like as the international signees get younger, you get more distance from when they sign to when they theoretically would be going to college, even if they're making a big amount of money in college. That kind of makes it difficult, right? To envision these kind of guys going to college as they're getting signed younger and younger.
It's happening, is what I'll say. It's happening more, but we have to zoom out all the way here in order to really understand why that can't really be, or why it can't be possible. Because if you think about the way the Latin American scouting structure operates, especially right now, where I think we are as an industry just scouting players so young. Like we're having like 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids, like, and you're making decisions on them. And so think about that, right? Like you have a 13-year-old kid you're making a decision on. That kid knows now he's got to be ready to be evaluated by 14, 15, or really 13, 14, 15, knows he's got to be ready by that point. His trainer knows he's got to be ready for that point. So at what point do you start making that your everyday focus as a kid? 2-3 years before that, that puts you in 10, 11, 8, 9, 10, and 11 as to when you kind of drop school. It goes by the wayside. So when you think about it from that standpoint,
It's insane.
right? Like you abandon the education component so early that in order to then qualify for high school, let alone college on the domestic side of things, and that's all in Spanish, by the way. We haven't even touched the English speaking. Now, you can take an ESOL type path in high school or college, but that's not easy either, right? And so you're just compounding a lack of overall education. And that's not for everybody. Some kids end up getting a complete education in these countries, but it's in the minority amongst the baseball playing population. More often than not, like you go watch a kid in the middle of a week on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. or a Tuesday at 11, and he's available for that tryout. He's not like, oh no, he's got school, he'll be back after school. Like he's available. Therefore, he's not going. Or they'll set up these systems where they go to school. Their entire school structure is stacked into Saturday. So they'll go to school on Saturdays. And, I think anybody who's been through an education system knows like you can't condense it all into 3 hours in an afternoon once a week. And so when you look at it from that lens, it's more understandable why we don't see more of it. That doesn't mean it's not possible, and that doesn't mean we won't see it. But I think the younger you scout them, the younger they abandon school. And the younger they abandon school, the lower the education base to then, now learn English and apply to a college and play Division I college sports. It's a long arc. It's a long way to go. And I think that's why we don't see much of it. And why you see, what you mentioned, these guys might get there theoretically a little earlier, but a lot of them are starting their professional careers at 16 versus a kid out of high school at 18 or 19, or a kid out of a junior or senior out of college at 22, 23. So like those years are spent in professional baseball in the minor leagues, which is the first place they actually do start to get some education for a lot of these kids. That's what I felt good about with the Marlins, for example. Like the Marlins have a really strong program of getting kids their high school degrees and at least getting them to a high school compatibility GED level graduation certificate. And a lot of other teams do that as well. But a lot of the times, and I know because I speak to the educators they intake these kids for the first time. And the overall base level of education varies from country to country, but it goes in the exact direction you think it does as the area gets poorer and as the economic conditions worsen in terms of literacy rates, even abilities to like write or sign names are limited. And so a lot of kids just have a long way to go on that front. And getting into a college in the United States is not easy if you don't speak English and if you don't have some curriculum. So
you think about someone who's made it work, right? Travis Bazzana, who was first pick of the draft, international college, big time college, but Australia.
Yep.
Right. So the English part was there. I know you've mentioned on prior shows, Bahamas maybe could be one where you still have some of the same issues as far as the age and the timing, but at least on the education component, you have English backgrounds and maybe a raw prospect. You could go to a JUCO or go to a school that could pay a little NIL, and then you develop from there. I know that's a big area that you've focused on. Do you think that could be something, knowing what you know about the college game, now being around that more, and then the Bahamian market, could there be a marriage there between international and college?
I think so, for sure. And I think you are seeing it because one thing I didn't mention was the contraction of minor league players. So like there's less minor league players and therefore less minor league opportunity. So players that would have played back into the minor leagues are now more in consideration for JUCOs or Division II or NAIA type. And I think you're seeing that. There's also some ability to bounce back. If you do get released out of a professional program, you do have some NAIA and D2 eligibility remaining. I've seen that happen too. But you mentioned the most important thing. Those countries speak English. And what we're talking about is assimilating into an American education system that functions fully in English. And you can have maybe an ESOL program that functions a lot in Spanish. But when you get to college, your coach is going to speak English. All the players on your team are going to speak English. So like that English component is a big one. And unless you went to a school that focused on it in the country that you're from, and some education is more ingrained into the cultures of some countries than in others, right? So Curacao has a high level base of education. Even like Venezuela had in a previous era had a higher base level of education, and still does to a certain extent. But it's important to see how much education is a part of the culture that they're coming from. And therefore, after that, you can extrapolate out who's got a better chance to make this transition. But English is a big one.
Well, somebody who came from a traditional international pipeline, Dominican, someone very, very well, and age-wise just turned 22, he could be pitching for LSU in the College World Series here. Can you imagine how that would look? And that's Yuri Perez. Obviously, been waiting for this one to pop up, but just so much fun to watch during his rookie year. Kind of Paul Skeens before Paul Skeens, although really he's younger, I believe, than Paul Skeens right now, even though he had a whole rookie year, got injured, and now is coming back. So saw him in the minor leagues. He looks like Yuri Perez, maybe a little bigger, like stronger. At least that's my view of him, seeing him up close. He's been in the dugout a little bit of some of these Marlins games. But I mean, what can you tell us about the player who you have a long history with and what you expect coming back from injury? Looks like the stuff is all the way back.
I think Yuri Perez is as close to a Jacob deGrom type of pitcher that as we've seen in a while. Young and like that similar profile. I think I have the benefit of having seen the entire arc of the Yuri Perez scouting outlook, which I've spoken about on other platforms, but I don't think we've ever covered Yuri to this point here because he's been hurt. And I think the industry has had a chance to kind of sleep on Yuri Perez because he had a short window of time to show who he was, and then got hurt right away. But like you mentioned, just 22 years old, and I would have pre-injury put his stuff up there with anybody in the game in terms of both pure velocity, command, as well as pitch profile movement. So that's where the Jacob deGrom stuff comes. Now Jacob deGrom is the top of the scale, so I don't want to give that guy. I don't give that away easily, but Yuri Perez is a scout's dream as a player. It's 6'9", projectable, clean arm action, athletic, high degree. Despite him looking like an avatar, really, he has a high degree of body control and fluidity, and he's displayed a lot of that as an amateur. I saw Yuri Perez as a 15-and-a-half-year-old amateur. I actually have him in scouting notes here. We pulled him out on the podcast de las Mayores on Yuri Perez's episode, so you got to catch that, whoever if you're watching here. But he, even at 6'3", he looked like he does now then, but it was 82 to 84 miles an hour with a nice shape to a breaking ball. But what stood out was the projection. Like this just projects well. He's 6'3", 6'4", 140 pounds, I think. But with what you and I talked about, looked right with a clean arm action. Which is on a lot of scouts. When you're evaluating a pitcher, like you can talk about velocity a lot, you can talk about physicality a lot, but like, does the arm work? And that's a subjective thing too. Guys' arms work in different capacities, but his is one, like this is how you draw it up. Like good, strong front side, clean, quick arm over the top, although from it's not 3/4 and it's not low 3/4, it's just kind of the right kind of slot for him to be able to stay on top of the baseball and get behind a four-seam fastball. That's why his pitch qualities are what they are. Yuri Perez has no ceiling. It's hard to say that about a player. He has no ceiling because his floor is so high right now. He's 22 years old. He's got that first Tommy John out of the way. Knock on wood, that's the only one he's going to have. But we've seen enough examples of pitchers coming back stronger after these surgeries because they now have a deeper appreciation for their pregame activation, the level of strength that's necessary to pitch in the big leagues for a good chunk of time. And I think that we haven't seen who Yuri Perez is. He's up there and he's a grown man now, but he looks young. He looks like young in the face. He looks like there's a lot more here. And I think his pairing with Sandy is really good. Like his just kind of being Sandy's right hand. And not like, I don't want to say shadow or anything like that because he's his own man. Like I don't think Yuri while he appreciates the comparison, I don't think he just wants to be like he's his own guy. But seeing that and the osmosis factor of knowing what I know about Sandy and how much he gets after it, regardless of what results are for him this year, it's a great model for Yuri to have. And so I think he's going to appreciate strength. He's going to appreciate activation, but even more so now after having gotten hurt, you come back differently, right? And I think that he's going to be on the positive side of that bounce back, and the stuff is already good with ceiling for more. So stands to reason that we're going to be talking about this pitcher as one of the best pitchers in baseball for a long, long time.
Seemed like a great kid. You did an interview with him on Spanish for a podcast. Just comparing him to Sandy, seemed like Sandy's obviously, everything I heard, great dude, great leader, but Yuri more kind of seems like more extroverted, at least from what I saw from that interview, kind of just more like he's younger too, right? He's a kid. But looking at the baseball savant for Yuri when he had that great rookie season, speaking of the Sandy comparison, one thing that really jumps out as a difference is whiff rate, 93 percentile, which is different than Sandy. He misses more bats than Sandy. Ground ball percentage, 2%. Or 2 percentile. I know what that has to do with maybe just the physiology of the whole thing and the size and the delivery, but it's
a different pitch package altogether, though.
Yeah.
So I have to say that certain pitchers, we're in this era where certain pitchers either work above the barrel with four-seam ride fastballs above the barrel and sliders down away in Yuri's case, and the changeup as well. But Sandy works on the bottom side in more of like a sinker heavy profile. So just like Sandy's built to miss less bats and put balls on the ground. Yuri's built in a complete other, like his only fastball is his four seam right now because it's so good. It makes sense for him to stay above barrels. He's got the velocity and the movement to live up there. Sandy's four seam, while it would have the velocity, doesn't have the action or the characteristics to live at the top of the zone consistently. His sinker does. Guys get on top of his sinkers and top it down. And so they're just, while they are big, right-handed, high-velocity pitchers, they're actually two very different pitchers from a pitch package standpoint. Sandy more of a fastball changeup specialist versus Yuri. I think it's more of a fastball slider profile, though he's got a devastating changeup too.
Let me ask about this because this surprised me. Going back to the baseball savant, the eye test said his fastball was his best pitch, at least me watching him in 2023, but the fastball run value, again, this is a limited sample. He only played 19 games.
Sure. The
fastball run value, they actually had him at the 32nd percentile, and then it was his breaking ball, 92nd percentile. Again, different than what I saw. Obviously, the velo is what it is, but it seemed to me like his fastball was his best pitch and everything worked off it. How do you take that number? And again, 19 games. I don't want to read too much into it, but is his breaking ball maybe better than at least I thought it was? And the fastball, how did those two interact based on what you're looking at with the baseball savant?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't have expected the fastball run value to be in a bottom third. I don't think that that's where it'll live. I think that was a short sample kind of situation. But if I could give credit to those in the Marlins, the player development and pitching development specific, I know guys like Scott Aldred and Tommy Phelps and Dave Island, these guys worked with Yuri to develop the slider that his breaking ball wasn't leading his pitch package ever. And at one point it was more of a big 12-6 curveball that he doesn't really throw anymore. He doesn't throw as much anymore, but his slider has come such a long way from the beginning of the development that for it to be playing, or when it played in 23 in the 92nd percentile, that's a player development story. So those guys, shout out to those guys and Yuri. You have to execute it too. You can have the best coaching in the world. If you don't go out and execute what's being done, then, I would have had the slider or breaking ball as Yuri's third best pitch in the early on in his minor league career. And here we are where the breaking ball has already flashed the ability to be an elite major league pitch. In addition to what I would have projected, the changeup off-speed run value is going to be good for him too. And just pitching in the 98 to 101 category with good data characteristics to the fastball, that projects well. I don't think that run value is truly indicative of how valuable that pitch will be.
Yeah, I can't help but think just because the size is so unique, there's not that many comps as far as elite pitchers of that height.
Right.
You think of the other side, the left side, the guy with a pretty dominant kind of fastball slider combo, and Randy Johnson. Not saying he's going to be that. Obviously, he's a right-hander, but there's just not that many guys that size that throw strikes, and his strike throwing way ahead of where Randy Johnson was.
Right.
from the left side at that stage of his career. So that's an interesting one to watch. A question from Kane's Cat Heat 305 that kind of gets to, really to me, Yuri plays into this, even though he's asking about high school recruiting, because you were looking at guys in international that were about the same age. So college coaches have to look at when they're about, or amateur scouts have to look at when they're evaluating these younger guys. Right. Probably more college coaches, right? Because you got to look, you got to commit those guys pretty early.
Sure.
14, 15. Not honestly, if you think about it, not that much different than what the international guys have to do. You're getting these guys locked in around 14, 15 to then have them in your system a little later. So from Kane's Cat, he's asking, for his own personal scouting, I know Kane's Cat's very big into following high school recruiting. For sophomores and juniors in high school, what's the velo you want to see? And let's say, for a guy you're projecting as a major league type talent, right? What's the velo you want to see as a sophomore, junior? Is 15, 16?
I'm sure there are averages that I can look at and say, and I'm sure that would be supported by, okay, velocity has gone up across high school. Therefore the average velocity, maybe it's 87, 88 that you'd want to have, to be considered in a pro context. But I'm not a velocity driven evaluator, period. I think velocity is just a very misleading. It can be a very it's nice. It's nice. You have velo, usually better, right? But we're in this era of like a TrackMan era or pitch data era that sometimes, like, I don't know if you guys remember Eliezer Hernandez.
Oh yeah.
Eliezer Hernandez was living 89, 91 but every team in baseball wanted him at a certain point because of the elite pitch characteristics. So you can have a 91 mile an hour fastball play better than a 97 mile an hour fastball. It's a real thing. And you see it across the big leagues, like guys that get miss rates that don't really make sense given their velocities. There's usually something interesting happening with their pitch characteristics, whether it be as a four-seam rider or as a sinker. So movement, I don't know if it's equally important to velocity, but it's up there. And then command, I'm going to be more of a command-driven player, so long as there isn't a big deficiency gap. I don't think you can operate for too long at the bottom of the velocity scale. But I don't know that I would say, like, if you're not throwing 87 and 89 as a high school pitcher, I have no interest. But if you're sitting consistently 82 to 83, which is what Yuri was at 15 years old.
Which leads to my next question I was going to ask, because I know from the interview you did with him, there was a big jump there.
So that just throws everything I just said out the window in that sense. So, like, what I can say about that is that every player's development arc is different. There are guys that I played with when I was 13, 14, 15, 16 in Miami that were the best dudes, but they were just like the man children early on. They're not playing baseball right now. You got a guy like Nick Martinez, who was not the dude on his high school team and is now, making millions of dollars in the big leagues. So, like, everybody's developmental arc is different, and their showcase points can be very different. Sometimes you're ready to be showcased at 17 and outshine everybody in your group, get some money, and go on. Sometimes you're not. How many guys you see drafted out of high school late, right? And then go on to get drafted higher after they go to college. Some guys hit their strides later. Some guys are ready. You're Bobby Witt and you hit that stride at 18 years old. Like, more power to you, man. Like, awesome. But every player is so vastly different, and context is so different for every player that I can't it probably doesn't satisfy, the question, because I don't have an average range. I would more focus on, does the arm work? Is there command? And then is there something interesting underlying in the fastball characteristic? Like, are you pitching with a four-seam fastball when you probably should be pitching with a two-seam fastball, and you want to throw the four-seamer just because it's a little bit harder than the two-seamer? But maybe the four-seamer is a 30-grade pitch and the two-seamer is a 55-grade pitch. Maybe you should be using that two-seamer more, even if you're going to get a little less velocity from it. And a lot of kids aren't even distinguishing the difference between those two, right? So that's what I would say to lock in on. Like, is he throwing the right fastball? Is he commanding the ball, and does the arm work? And if he's not in some red flag velocity territory, then you got something to work with. But red flag velocity territory is not great. But I don't know where red flag territory is if a Yuri Perez can be 82 to 84 at 15. That's why the earlier we make these scouting decisions, the worse we are at them. It's just like, high school players were worse than we are with college players. We don't even get major league free agents right. at a super high clip. So how do we think we're going to get 13, 14, 15-year-old decisions right? And the answer is that we're not. We get some of them right. I think it's more, I don't know if it's more luck or I don't know what to attribute that to, but I think earlier scouting and earlier evaluating, although it has to be done, I think we as an industry across the board try to do this way too early.
Yeah. I think Tyler Kolek, I think that was before your time with the Marlins. He was throwing 102.
Yep.
Never played as far as I know, I don't think he ever played a big league game at all. So who knows? On projecting velocity, before we leave this, because I want to, the Yuri example is so obvious considering he's elite fastball velocity. Even now with your Tommy John, he's coming right back to elite fastball velocity already, and he was where he was at 15.
Yep.
Do you mentioned some of the the pitch shape and the ability to throw strikes, those kind of things. But are there things you look at to project velocity physically in terms of whether it is height, whether it's big hands, just like physical characteristics, twitchiness, athleticism? Are there things that you look at and say, hey, yeah, he's throwing 85 now, but the guy's 6'5" and he's athletic, it'll come?
For sure. I think athletes are appreciated in every category. We can add, if the guy's a plus athlete, you can project better on everything that he does. But pitching wise, there are certain markers like strength. Just brute strength sometimes is just what can help you gain velocity. Like these big, like Roger Clemens was just like, he did a lot of things well, but like there's very few replacements for strength. Not every guy needs to be strong like that. And if you're not strong like that, you have to have some tightness and quickness in the ligaments, some elasticity to the way your body operates in order to generate that torque. But what I have seen as a consistent marker is something that is, I don't know, have you heard of force plates? You ever, force plates, basically you do a series of assessments and evaluations that they involve like your vertical jump and just the amount of force that you generate off of those plates. We as an industry now, not only do we do them in the gym setting, but now there are even these mounds that you build these force plates into the mound, and you can get a good sense of what kind of force that player is generating from the ground up and what kind of explosion is being able to initiate the kinetic chain throughout the rest of the body. But then like you got to think about it. You could be generating a lot of force from the ground and have really strong legs, but if you misfire along the way and up the torso and your arm action doesn't work, it slows all those things down. But if you do have a good athletic base, I remember this came up, and this is not talking about a pitcher, but CJ Abrams, we talked about this a lot in the draft room. Shout out Dan Greenlee for being the one, like, because we were between Abrams and Blade in our consideration that year with the Marlins. And I remember Dan talking about the explosion, like, because he was skinny. CJ Abrams, like, you were like contact driven, you were trying to project power, and he has had some power. And then I remember him talking about, like, look at these force plate readings, these athleticism level, this vertical jump component to it. I think that there's a strong indicator between like overall explosion, which you need at a certain point with a pitcher, hitter, no matter what, like no matter how elastic you are, you need to get that point where everything kind of uncoils or unfurls. And guys that put up high athletic scores on box jumps and force plates, that's a good one. It's a kind of it's a modern way to look at the game, but I think we have that info, and therefore it should be leveraged in making these decisions.
You see it in football.
Yep.
A lot of times, I know speed and velocity, foot speed and velocity. I mean, there's some parallels. You see people project foot speed in terms, let's say 40-yard dash increases based on a vertical leap or a broad jump.
Yep.
You say if this
sense.
broad jump and the vertical leap is here and the 40 is here, there's technical issues in the running style. Maybe there's just some strength needed, but it doesn't match. Eventually, the speed will catch up to the vertical jump. Most likely, you're not going to have these outlier vertical jumps and broad jumps without speed.
Right.
There's something wrong with the speed part that can be fixed. You can't fake the jumping. So you see crossover between sports with that.
I got one more thing too, though, and because you have to give credit to guys. There are pitching coaches, and there are guys that look at throwing and pitching in a way that can help you unlock. They can help you. Maybe you have like a break. The brakes are being put on somewhere in your sequence. That with a couple tweaks, maybe like Sixto Sanchez was a big one. If he kept that front side closed just a tick longer, stayed on the ball better, fastball quality was better, velo was better. Sometimes he'd want to, like Stan Meek, longtime scouting director for the Marlins, we're always talking about like he wants to go left too quickly. He wants to kind of like open up, and you lose, like the brakes get put on in your kinetic chain to lose power that you're generating. And like, I think Mel Stoudemire was really good with this, for example, like of guys, like getting guys to understand the best position for you to be in for your arm to like come out quick. And I think sometimes that's a pitching coach that's telling you the right kind of cue right in your career trajectory where you needed to hear it, where like, oh, now damn, that came out well. Right. But I also, guys that take care of their arms, man, guys that actually are disciplined with their arm programs and their arm care and their long tossing and their, we have things now that can measure down to like intensity of each throw, track every throw you make. Guys that leverage those tools right now are gaining velocity, are gaining, like there's a way, there are some traditional ways to do it, especially if you use modern ways to monitor those things. Like I give my hat tip to Nick Martinez every time I can, but I watch his off seasons, right? I watch him work through his off seasons and it's so meticulous. He knows on a given day, because of the sleeve and the things that he works with, that he knows where he's at fatigue wise. He knows where he's at on the week volume wise. He knows where he's at zoomed out even more on the month. And he knows like, okay, I got to ramp it up today. I didn't do enough yesterday. He constantly has a day-to-day feel of where his arm is at. And the pitcher that can leverage that or can use that to train. So strength train appropriately, can use that to build up volume and innings appropriately and build up velocity. So there's some old school components to this where if you take care of your arm, you're going to develop some velocity. A lot of guys don't appropriately, I shouldn't say a lot, but a good chunk of guys don't do the arm care program that their pitching coordinators and development guys would love for them to do.
Talking about velocity, this is somebody that we saw on Friday, unfortunately for Mike Haynes, because he was absolutely outstanding when he needed to be. But we'll be seeing him at the College World Series. That is Patrick Forbes, converted outfielder. Talk about, somebody with just that pure arm talent that is now becoming a pitcher. 14-inch, 17-inch movement, up to 99 miles an hour, 5.2 release height. Just a lot of interesting stuff going on with the way this guy throws the baseball from the right side as I pull up some highlights here, which is a really interesting player and somebody who, we'll see on the biggest stage here in Omaha, but he caught your attention with what he can do on the mound.
He did baseball all year, and I was watching their run all year. And, when this was the guy they faced in the first round of the Super Regionals, I hadn't really locked in on Forbes to this point. First of all, I'm glad we're talking about college baseball because college baseball is putting out a really good product right now, especially in the supers and as we go into Omaha. But this is another example. This looks right, man. This is big, physical, clean arm action, 96 to 98, with that riding fastball that works at the top of the zone. So he can get above barrels and generate miss with both velocity and pitch movement. And there's a high degree of projection here. This just looks right, man. It's like quick, explosive arm, big physical player. Doesn't look physically like he's at his physical maturity ceiling. So there's a lot to like here. And he took me by surprise. I was not expecting I don't know. I'd have a tough time not taking this guy in the first 15 picks of the draft. Somebody gets this guy in the back end of the first round because he doesn't have a whole lot of time pitching and he's a conversion guy. I think they're going to get something pretty special. But this late run that he's making, I think he's making himself some money in the draft in this late push. So
yeah, they had him on Baseball America as right there at the end of the first round, like you said, 40th pick, and
that looks better than that to me. I think a lot of teams are going to maybe somebody takes him there, and then 3-5 years when he's pitching in the big leagues, doing what he's doing, I think we're going to be like, okay, a lot of teams maybe wish they would have taken him more aggressively. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if a team in the 12, 13, 14 misses out on their top target and then quickly pivots to something like this, because you can straight face select that at any point in the first round, maybe outside of the top 3 picks with what else is available. And I've heard from a lot of scouts that it's just a down year overall in the draft. Just watching him on Friday feels like he belongs in a higher tier than back of the first round, more like middle to top 10 picks for me.
Ton of people on the stream and stuck with us the whole stream. So shout out to you guys. Like and subscribe. We're coming every Monday, talking whatever you want to talk about, man. Let us know in the comments what you want us to talk more about, man. Do we want us to dive into? It could be anything, college, pro, international, from a scouting perspective, international pro, like, MPB, KBO.
Hold on, before we go, can I jump in on something?
Oh yeah, we're going. I just wanted to give a shout
Okay.
out to the people in the chat, but we're
You
not
have
going
to.
yet.
Well,
Go ahead.
This is also a shout out to the people in the chat, but also to you. I feel like you get to introduce me in every show, but I never really get to mention you, Danny D Money, and you're the person and the reason that I came out of my shell to do this show. Right, you're one of the only people I would have agreed to have as a partner in this, and I think that that's. I just got to tell you, man, I appreciate it. And we never get to introduce you. You never get your flowers on this show. But I know I'm reading a lot of, I'm imagining that Kane's Cat Heat 305 is on your live streams, Kane's Insight as well at times. And I really respect you and the platform that you've built on Kane's Insight that's allowed me to watch, and follow closely with all the stuff you guys do, the live streams, the coverage. I can't get enough of it, first of all. And I know you have a huge community of people that does. And then you come, let's call it maybe not your sweet spot in terms of like your expertise base to come do a baseball show, and you just knock it out of the park right away. And so to me, you got this versatility of skill and knowledge and hunger. I feel like you follow baseball more closely than I do in some capacities. I don't know how you have the bandwidth for it all, but I didn't want to go too many episodes without acknowledging the fact that, first of all, I think you're killing it in this capacity. You allow me to be in a more comfortable dynamic than having to steer this thing from the very beginning. So I just it needed to be said at some point, and this feels like a good opportunity too.
Listen, man, I appreciate it. What I like about this is I get to sit at the learning tree and ask. I'm not asking questions that I know the answer to, right? So that's the fun part. Sometimes you ask questions to set people up. I actually don't know the answers to these questions, so that's what's fun about doing this kind of show with someone like you. You mentioned the Canes, so I talk about somebody that I wish he was a Hurricane because he's from Fort Myers, but he ended up at Arkansas with a little detour through East Carolina and absolutely blew me away watching him against Tennessee. I already knew he was good, but seeing him against Tennessee, both the intensity that he played with, sometimes maybe too much intensity, I almost got in trouble, almost got in a fight coming off the mound, throwing 98 from the left side, Zach Root. Someone I know you're familiar with, so I'm gonna pull up some clips here. But just breaking down the game of Zach Root, the left-hander from Arkansas, who I didn't see in the Baseball America mock draft. I know he's been in other mock drafts, so he's in that first-round mix. But I can't imagine there's 40 prospects better than what this dude is doing from the left side.
Not who Tennessee wanted to see to open up the Super Regionals. That's filthy from the left side. Big power, big physical left-hander with a quick, clean arm action. Probably a guy that's closer to his physical maturity already. So you're kind of like what you see is what you get, but the floor is significantly high. I think whoever selects Zach Root is going to have made a good draft selection. I think it's a little bit different of a profile. It's more of like a fastball slider, but I see a lot of like if you like Tariq Skubal and the way that works, I see, big physical left-hander with a power fastball, and one guy's more of a slider profile than Skubal. So maybe it's not a clean comparison, but I really like Zach Root a lot. I like that. I like how fired up, how fired up he was in that game. And some people might think that's taking it too far. But I think if you see the atmosphere that we put these kids in, and you just give cultural context to the fact that there's an acceptability level to this, why wouldn't that be what we see on national TV? Like, have you ever heard anybody talk about going to play at Arkansas? Like, it's like one of the more electric atmospheres in the country. One of the most electric places to play, or Tennessee, or these places, like these environments. Like, I feel like the kids are just being authentic to the moment and to the situation. Now, we're asking them to play a grown man game and then play it like, nice with like a tie on. And I just don't think those two things are going together culturally speaking right now. So no matter how you feel about it, I think it's appropriate to the game today. And I'd rather be toning a guy down on a competitiveness level than having to ramp him up. So like, I'd rather err on that side of things than too low of a motor, too low of a heartbeat to like get you to compete. So if I had to pick one side or the other, I'd pick where he's at. But if I'm on the other side, if I'm on the other bench, do I like that? Hell no. If I'm on the other team, I hate that. But that's competition.
Takes two to tango. Fisher was giving it to him too. he's a very dangerous hitter himself. So it wasn't like it was just a unilateral deal there.
There's an old adage in baseball overall: if you don't like it, play better. And that's sorry, and some other guys on the other side are not going to like that. And somebody watching with their 10-year-old kid is not going to love that. But this is a grown man's game. It's played by kids. But at the end of the day, the product that they're all working towards is for grown men. So it's more appropriate in that setting.
Let me ask you this, because I know you come from the international side, but you're in the room, right, with the amateur guys and in the draft room as well. A guy like Root, let's say right now, they have him right there at outside the first round, probably right on the border. So let's say this exact profile, guy that, do we put him in that first round category?
I would.
But let's just say he's where he's at now.
Yeah.
Now he's heading into the College World Series.
Yep.
And let's say he continues this great performance in Arkansas, which I think they're probably the favorite. They'd be my pick. They win it all, and this guy carries them in his starts to the to the championship. Does that hold weight in a draft room, or is his evaluation kind of fully baked at this point?
It's a great question. I think that his evaluation is probably 80% baked at this point, because he's got enough of a bulk of a college career at Eastern Carolina, and then now at Arkansas, and everybody's got access to TrackMan data. So they have enough of a base to see who he is. And I think that's a combination of performance and data of your pitch characteristics, right? But now I think that final 20% can move you up a board, because now here's what happens. Now every cross-checker in the country is going to be at this game. So it's important to note how players get scouted at the top, right? At the first round level. Like, every region has an area scout. Zach Root is probably first on the Arkansas area scout. Whoever's covering that part of the country for them, he's probably 1, 2, or 3 on that list. And if you are that, then you'll get a regional cross-checker usually, which is one more level up from the area scout, usually covers a region and cross-checks that area scout's region. He usually has 3 or 4 guys that he cross-checks. But at this level, you're probably getting national cross-checkers, which is that next tier of evaluator in an amateur scouting department, which sees everybody, sees the whole country, as well as the individual scouting directors themselves. If you're a scouting director, you got to at least see the guys you're going to try to make your first, second, or third selections with. You don't have time to see all of them, but you see those. Therefore, you get a lot of those layers of looks, right? But you only get those last layers if a guy's pitching this deep into the year. So at these games, you'll get a national cross-checker. You'll probably get some scouting directors, a lot of scouting directors in to see a Tennessee Arkansas game, because we're so far out from the draft still. The draft is in July. And so really, like, the guys that are seeing him now is not just the area scout. It's the decision makers in the group. And therefore, a decision maker shows up and watches you do something that's less quantifiable than TrackMan data or your stat line from the year, and sees that you're pitching against Tennessee in the biggest game of the year. Your stuff holds. Compete your ass off. You throw first pitch strikes. You execute. You have a put away pitch, which he has a put away pitch. That stuff can fly you up the draft board late. But I would say 80% of that decision is made, and this 20%, in his case, can take him from a second round pick or a comp pick into the middle of the first round. So for this pocket of players, I think it does make a significant difference. But a lot of the decision is set up there.
Well, look, we'll be watching him. We're watching Ava Arquette, Kate Anderson, a lot of great talent on display in Omaha. We will have you covered there, internationally, MLB, and more. El Big League Show. Remember to like and subscribe. Appreciate you joining on this live chat. We'll see you next Monday.